But I would be concerned if I had that much in foreign exchange reserves, $500 billion. Well, the Russians had 300 billion, and look what happened to that. Am I saying the West is going to freeze India's reserves? No, but there's a possibility. Tuesday, July 9th, 2024, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today we're going to look at India and whether it will be the next target of the West in terms of sanctions and the freezing of reserves. And we're also going to look at what's happening here in the UK in terms of what could happen to your reserves as well, or your savings, or your wealth with the new government. We'll start with that because yesterday, the new Chancellor of the Exchequer, and for those of you who are not from the UK, the Chancellor of the Exchequer is the equivalent of Janet Yellen in the US, the US Secretary of the Treasury, or the equivalent of a finance minister in Europe. So this is what she said, and this is reported in the FT. Rachel Reeves warns UK public finances in worst state since Second World War. Of course, that's not surprising, but it's not the kind of message that the previous government was giving. They were saying that things were getting better and improving, but here she comes and she wants an audit of what's going on. It says UK's new Labour Chancellor has instructed Treasury to examine state spending under the Conservatives. Why do I think this is important? Well, it's important because she's giving herself an excuse to come after your reserves. And I'm using the word reserves because we're going to skip to India next. And because India's reserves are also under threat. Of course, their reserves are the reserves of a sovereign nation. And you need to think of yourself as a sovereign individual because be it Labour, be it Conservatives, be it even Reform, they're going to come after you. That's the only thing, unfortunately, governments know how to do. Well, one of the few things they know how to do. First one is to take your property, which is really wrong. It's unlawful, I would say, but they make it legal. The second thing is if you don't hand in your property, they take away your freedom. They lock you up. And the third one, they're very willing to take away people's lives. And we've seen through the centuries that whenever there is massive deaths in the world, it's because of wars. And who creates the wars? Well, it's the state. So, yes, where could she come after in terms of your reserves? Well, inheritance tax, your private pension. They're even talking about means testing the state pension, which is pretty outrageous, I would say. You've been contributing for 30, 40 years, and they come and say, oh, you can't have your state pension. I'm not sure that will happen. But yes, capital gains tax, they could raise that, and many other things. And that's why I keep telling you people, just like sovereign countries are doing, and just like India is doing, hedge your bets and get some physical gold and silver outside the system. Because anything that is within the regulated financial system of the UK can be taken from you. And by taken, I don't mean the whole thing, but it can be taxed. Gold and silver are much harder for them to come after, especially if you get coins of that realm here in the UK and even in the US. I mean, again, if you have questions, call my affiliates here in the UK, Gold Investments, Oliver and Simon Temple. They will give you a personalized service. Yes, they have a website that you can deal through, but they're also like old-fashioned, that they will talk to you on the phone. You can even go and visit them in London and talk about it. And all the details are below in the description. So that's what I wanted to say about the UK. The other thing is I've been reading a little bit about Rachel Reeves and her heroes in the economic sphere. One of them is Janet Yellen. Yeah, here you go. New York Times reported this a few days ago. I haven't seen anyone talk about this here in the UK, but it says the American inspiration for Britain's first female chancellor, Rachel Reeves, who will oversee Britain's budget, is expected to pursue an agenda influenced by Janet Yellen's more activist approach to job creation and investment in the United States. Well, what does that mean? Well, she believes in the state being involved in the economy. It's kind of a national socialist strategy, I would say. And you can make what you will about national socialism. And at the end here, it also talks about that one of her heroes is an economist called, what's his name again? His name is Denny Roderick. And I went to his Wikipedia page, and this is what it says here. In his article, he focused on three tensions between global market and social stability, pointing out that the so-called globalization has a dilemma of promoting international equality while exposing fault lines between the nation states with the skills and capitals to succeed in global markets and those without that advantage. And this is what I found quite interesting. He says he sees the free market system as a threat to social stability and deeply domestic norms. So this is the kind of economist that she follows. The other economist is this one here, the star economist who inspired Sir Keir Starmer's missions, Marina Mazzucato, on her interventionist arguments Labour plans to enact. So she's another one of these that thinks the government has to kickstart the economy. She even talks about that the NASA program in the 60s and the moon landing was a great way to boost the economy, even though, of course, the 70s was mired with stagflation. So this is the kind of people that, unfortunately, Labour are leaning upon for advice. Am I saying the Tories or the Conservatives were better? No. All I'm trying to say is that don't get your hopes up. Look after your sovereign affairs yourself. Try to protect yourself as much as possible. So back to India, trying to protect itself, right? And I think it should. I'm not sure if anyone in the Indian government is listening to me, but I spoke about this back on June 1st. India repatriated, at the time, there's a story that India repatriated 100 tons of physical gold from the Bank of England. And now you can see why they're doing that, because Modi, of course, yesterday flew to Moscow for a 2-day summit with President Putin. And it was the first summit since the start of the, since the, I don't want to say the start of the war, because the war started in Ukraine back in 2014. But since the Russian Federation got involved in 2022 is the first time Modi goes there. And now I can see why the Indians are repatriating their gold. They're hedging their bets because they have a huge amount of foreign exchange reserves. As you can see here, this is from Reuters. Story from June 14th. India's Forex reserves hit record high. So foreign exchange assets, they've got over $500 billion or over $500 billion. They've got gold as well, of course, almost 57 billion. But I would be concerned if I had that much in foreign exchange reserves, $500 billion. Well, the Russians had 300 billion, and look what happened to that. Am I saying the West is going to freeze India's reserves? No, but there's a possibility, and I think that's why India also, according to reports yesterday, has continued to add on to its gold reserves. You can see here Peter Spina from GoldSeek reporting, India's central bank boosts gold reserves by the most in 2 years after moving 100 tons from the UK to domestic vaults. Yes, I spoke about that 100 tons over a month ago. But yeah, they've added the most in the last 2 years to their reserves in the month of June. And I'm going to put this article here, I think it's from Fortune magazine, in the description of the video. And yesterday again, people are noting that the People's Bank of China hadn't added on to their gold reserves again in June after not doing so in May and stopping in an 18-month process of increasing it every month. Does it mean the Chinese are not buying gold anymore? I don't think so. Because if you have followed gold like I have for many years, you should know that the Chinese, what they did in the last 18 months or 20 months of updating their reserves every month was very unusual, because they went for years not updating their reserves. And I'm sure they're using other means to acquire gold. I think they got a bit concerned that gold was getting ahead of itself, and they want to pay the best price, just like anyone. So I wouldn't be concerned about that. China's going to continue to buy gold, not just the Chinese public, but the People's Bank of China and state-owned institutions. The only countries that really don't care much about gold, unfortunately, are countries like the UK, the US, and those in Western Europe, which is unfortunate. But you don't have to follow their example. Follow the example of the other countries, I would say, because who holds the gold makes the rules, right? You are sovereign if you've got gold. You can always move around anywhere in the world, and it will be accepted. And if you hold fiat currency in the bank or in the financial system, it can always be frozen. So that's the lesson about India and also ourselves here in the UK or anywhere else in the world. Be sovereign, have a bit of gold. And what about the meeting between Modi and Putin? Well, I think it's quite significant because today we've got the 75th anniversary NATO summit in Washington, D.C., which is where NATO was created in 1949. And it's interesting that something happened yesterday in Kiev. I'm not going to talk about it because I feel that in times of war, the first victim of war is the truth, so we don't know what's going on. But suffice it to say, it's interesting that I've watched a few clips from some Indian news network on YouTube, and the major point behind the summit is to make sure that India and Russia are still good allies, and they're going to focus on energy, defense, and trade. So much for Russia being isolated. And I'm not defending anyone, I'm just trying to observe what's happening in the world. And I think that this is going to continue. The West is isolating itself, and the rest of the world, they're going to try to build an alternative to the West, because I was thinking recently, how can non-Western leaders trust the West? Look what happened to Muammar Gaddafi. Look what happened to Saddam Hussein, who was actually put there by the CIA. There's a photo of him meeting with Donald Rumsfeld back in the 80s. Look at the Panamanian leader. I forgot his name. He was a CIA stooge. Look what happened to him. So I think the world's woken up that the West is not very nice. You deal with them and they backstab you and they hang you, or they have, they let your country be invaded. They help out, like in Libya. And am I saying a lot of these leaders are good? No, but are our leaders any good either? So it's interesting that I saw a little clip yesterday of Modi arriving in Putin's house, because Putin said, yes, on the first day we're going to meet informally in my home. And they had a big hug, as you can see here. But the Washington Post reported on it. Putin receives Modi in Moscow with high stakes for both Russia and India. And look at the photo. They're shaking hands and they couldn't be further apart than a hug. So just wanted to put that out there. You can see they could have put the hug of both leaders. So what it tells me is that, India needs to watch its back. And with that, let's quickly look at where the markets are this morning. It's 8:15 a.m. London time. We've got spot gold at 2,362. That's up $3. High's been 69, low has been 55. Silver has traded back above $31 today. We are at $30.99, just below it, up 22 cents. High's been 12, low 65. And the other thing about silver is that the Shanghai prices, and gold for that matter as well, are still trading at a fairly big premium. So yesterday, I haven't got the data for today yet. They'll come out later. So July 8th, the Shanghai gold futures settled almost at $35, $34.77. The gold futures in the Shanghai Gold Exchange, $23.94. And then on the futures exchange, the Shanghai futures, because there's two exchanges, Shanghai futures, silver as well, almost at 35, and gold almost at 2,400. So ever since late last year, the price, the Chinese price, is really been driving the market. So I still expect the markets to consolidate a bit, the Western prices, but I think it's going to be very difficult for them to go much lower than, let's say, 2280 for gold, and much lower than actually 2850, 29 for silver. What about the stock market? Yeah, the melt up continues. And why is that? Well, because I saw that Citi is looking for a quarter percent rate cut in September, and then for the next 6-9 months, they're expecting a quarter rate cut every month from the Fed. And I think that's wishful thinking. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if the Fed intervenes, because we've seen that Goldman Sachs failed the stress test that the Fed had. I mean, I spoke about Goldman Sachs a couple of weeks ago, all its derivatives positions. So, this is not good, because there will be a point where, the stock market will keep going up, but the dollar is going to drop much faster. And by that, I don't mean versus other fiat currencies. I mean versus real money, i.e. gold and silver. And that's what a currency collapse looks like. During the Weimar hyperinflation, during the Zimbabwe Venezuelan, Brazilian, Argentinian. The stock markets did really well, but there came a point that the currency dropped a lot quicker than the stock market. So you're actually losing big time even in the stock market. And that's the way I see it. What about the currencies? Well, they're pretty steady. I noticed the dollar dropped yesterday towards 160 versus the yen, so maybe the BOJ is intervening. But right now we're back to almost 161. What about crude oil? Well, yeah, that's come off a bit. WTI is back below 82 and Brent is at 85.20. High grade copper is still fairly firm at 463. It's up 0.5%. And the bond markets are fairly steady. I think treasury yields went up slightly yesterday. Actually, the French 10-year yield was fairly steady yesterday. So we didn't see any spike despite what happened politically in France, and that's a different story. So right now, I'm going to stop and wish you a very good day. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.